Welcome to our sales conversation, another journey into urgency-based selling, bold vision, bold behavior. Today's subject is 7 ideas to open new conversations, new customers faster. Going out of the box and with a focus on what pure selling can accomplish. There are 3 types of thinking that'll be embedded in today's seminar: entrepreneurial, risk assessment, and project management. Together, these add up to alignment with leadership mindset. So are you ready? Are you ready? Could be a bit intense today. Could be a bit intense. So my recommendation is fasten your mental seatbelt, yourself for a deep plunge into urgency-based selling. Underlying today's seminar is this idea: can we time pace new and trusted advisor status? Can you get there faster? What is time pacing? Time pacing was popularized by 3M at the end of the 80s, early 90s, when they set the standard that 30% of profit should come from businesses that did not exist 5 years ago. They weren't waiting for existing lines like Scotch tape and Post-it notes to become a buggy whip, which is a metaphor for an obsolete product. They were creating the future, they were time pacing. And we're going to look at methods today to time pace, forming productive relationships and closing more sales faster. By the way, if you're curious about the idea of time pacing, it comes from this book, Competing on the Edge. It's a great read on strategy and looking into the future. It's futuristic. Now, the program I offer that's at the base of today's webinar is urgency-based selling, and the program was born in a crisis. I didn't think it was going to be a crisis. I worked for a company many years ago that made an obsolete product, a lard can. And it was kind of an orphan product because they had bought a factory that made it, nobody was selling it. And the assignment was to turn it into a decorative tin. And nobody was really selling it, so I took it on as an assignment. And then ultimately, I proposed to the company, and it was accepted, the idea was accepted, that I would become an independent sales agent. And so I started my first business, and I thought it was going to be pretty good because they were turning all accounts over to me. I had a recurring revenue. I thought I had it made. And then crisis struck. Within 3 months, the biggest customer, who was 80% of the sales, they dropped the item. And I was in a do or die scenario. I put all my chips, bet all my chips on this opportunity, and I was totally unprepared for it. So for the next 2 years after this crisis, I ran around the US, opening some accounts, starting to learn my trade, but I was losing money. Money was going out the door because I lost that 80%. And then I found Bunty Candy, which by itself would have replaced the lost business and put me on the map. They made candy, they put them in the tins, and they shipped them out. So I knocked on the buyer's door, and the buyer said, "We're good. We've been buying from General Can for the last 5 years." And at this point in my career, I didn't even know how to handle that. So I went on to other opportunity. Well, that was a very tough year, that second year of the business. My wife had to go on bed rest because of a tough pregnancy. My son's okay now, many years later, but we didn't know it at the time. So we lost her income and her insurance. And in the summer of that year, the engine head of my car cracked, and I didn't have a car. I live in New Jersey. It's pretty hard to get around without a car. So I was in emotional free fall. I was facing failure. If you've ever seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life, think of George Bailey at the bridge. My hope is through the ideas I share, you folks will never face this kind of crisis. And time permitting, I will talk later in this short webinar about how I solved this problem and my business grew a 10x afterwards. The thing that we're trying to achieve is creating a trusted advisor relationship of respect. That's what we all want, I think. And the frustration when we do business development is the incumbent vendor is already the trusted advisor, and they're kind of rolling the ball downfield. And what we're doing is we're trying to kick it upfield, and it's a tough assignment. So what we're all looking for is a way to level the playing field. How do we level the playing field before experience? If you talk, to many salespeople as I have, how did you become a trusted advisor? Well, we did a little business, a little more, and after 3 to 5 years, we became a trusted advisor. Well, we don't have 3 to 5 years. How do we do this before experience? So here's idea number 1, 4 transformational words. If you're already not subscribing to these words, they could change your life, put you on top of the heap. Bold vision, bold behavior. So if you're not getting what you want in a specific scenario, were you bold enough in your vision? Were you bold enough in your behavior? For instance, after I solved the Bunty Candy crisis and my business took off, about 10 years later, I had a reason to hire a new CPA firm. That CPA firm wanted to sell me a higher level product, tier 2 product, a cash flow management approach or technique. They invited me in, I came, I saw a 1-hour presentation. Afterwards, I asked the named partner, Bert, is this how you folks normally sell? And he said, yeah, it was pretty good, wasn't it? I said, gee, I think it needed work. Well, I called him back a week or 2 later and I said, Bert, you and your 6 partners, there were 7 partners in the CPA firm, you need to hire me to teach you how to sell. What do you folks think? Does that have a high likelihood of success? Well, they were kind of curious about my ideas. So what happened is they invited me in for a meeting. On one side of the table, you got the 3 named partners. I'm on the other. It's kind of how the conversation went. So Andy, have you ever done this program before for a CPA firm? No. Do you have any testimonials, to show the success you've had with the kind of program you have in mind? No. Have you ever done this at any time, anywhere for anyone? No. Do you have some curriculum you could show us? So if we hire you, you could show us what you're going to teach us? No. Then what makes you think you could help us? Well, I said, you presented to me, it was here, it should be here, and I could fill the gaps. Well, they decided to give it a test. Now, quite frankly, there was more to it. They liked some of my ideas, but the test was, they had an upcoming sales call. They're trying to close a manufacturer, did 30 million in sales for their CPA firm. They invited me out to be an observer. My lips, look, listen, debrief afterwards. For the first hour of the sales call, I followed my instructions. And then I couldn't take it anymore. So I raised my hand, they melted. I was acknowledged by the owner of the manufacturing firm. I asked 2 questions and I closed the sale. And about a month later, they hired me. During the 6 months I worked with the CPA firm, their closing ratio went from 20 to 80%. Accounting Today is an industry publication for CPAs. There was a front page article about my interaction. This over here is me and this is Bert. I have more hair back then. So your first takeaway is, are you being bold enough? Second idea, are you a level 5 leader? Now, Collins describes the level 5 leader in Good to Great. The level 5 leader is strong, competent, dominant, and humble. What, you say? Andy, aren't you either strong or humble? Well, that's what, in a previous book, Collins and Porras call the tyranny of the or. Great companies embrace the and. So you want to be dominant and humble. How do you do this? Use the window in the mirror. When things go well, look outside the window. I'm looking outside the window, and give credit to your team. When things don't go well, look in the mirror and ask yourself, what else could I have done? Now, in a dysfunctional company, dysfunctional selling, we reverse this. What does that mean? Well, when things go well, we look in the mirror and say, wow, I'm pretty good. And things don't go well, we look outside the window and say, who can we blame? Sometimes that's called learned helplessness. Now, one way that I try to prevent for myself learned helplessness is I try to test a minimum of 5 new ideas a week. How many new ideas do you test a week so that you use the mirror and the window properly? And do the sales values in your company support sales innovation? Here's a simple application on humility. When somebody is good enough to take a first call with me, I'll say, my objective for this call is that you're glad you took the call and that you have real takeaways. And I'll test that at the end of the call. And if I failed, I'll give it to them. This came out of this process of experimentation. A major prospect vanishes after a first meeting, great first meeting, very frustrating, right? Radio silence. Why does this happen? I think what happens is that very often in a first call, the prospect is testing us or getting to know us rather as an option. In other words, someday in the future, I may need what you have and I'm getting to know you, but I don't need to talk to you anymore right now because I have enough information, right, to know that you're an option. Now let's look at how we could use an important part of the standard sales call to deal with the option scenario, right? So the first part, you warm up the prospect. The second part, fact finding. The third part, you meet the closing conditions and close the sale. I want to draw your attention to step 5, the freebie, which we would also call wisdom. What is the wisdom that you bring to every sales call? How do you prepare for a sales call? See, a prospect may not want you to sell to them, but they might be interested in type 3 knowledge. Type 1 is what they know, type 2 is what they know they don't know, and type 3 is what they don't realize they don't know. Most prospects are in the market for type 3 knowledge. So if we're trying to sell our product or service, they don't have any need to talk to us because they're not buying. But what if you have a brand, you've established the brand, that you bring wisdom to the table? That could be another matter. That could level the playing field. That could get you into a conversation if they know that every time you call or reach out to them, you have some real wisdom to offer. What is wisdom? Wisdom is valuable information that will improve their well-being where they don't have to buy from you to consume the wisdom. Fourth idea, the magic moment of access. What do you do in the magic moment of access? The magic moment means you've met a client's needs and you're in contact with them. You confirm they're delighted. There are no further needs. You now have a magic moment of access to do a miracle, to do something amazing. What can you do? Well, let's say they're cherry picking your line. They're not buying the whole line. They're buying A, but not B. You could ask them to break the pigeonhole and try another product. Perhaps as importantly, you can ask for an introduction. Maybe you're not selling all of the divisions or departments in the company. Maybe they can introduce you to somebody in another company that doesn't compete with them. You know, to prepare for the magic moment, if you think you might have a magic moment coming up, it's always good to link in, make sure you're linked in, look at First Connections and see to whom do you want to be introduced so you can make a specific request. Now, it's important to ask for introductions because they're the superhighway to our growth. Big fans are, that is. Sally's story. I was working with a sales team of about 15, including Sally. We did 35 million in sales, and half of the sales went to one major Fortune 500 company. Sally covered that company. Now, we came to the part of the program where it was time to ask for a warm introduction. So the assignment was when we met again 2 weeks later, everybody should have a warm introduction. Let me parachute you into Sally's one-to-one meeting 2 weeks later. So, Sally, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing great. Have you had a good week? Yeah, I had a great week. Tell me, were you able to get any warm introductions? No, I wasn't. Okay, just starting this program. How many people did you ask at this big client? Nobody. Nobody? Didn't you know we all had the assignment to go ahead and ask? Oh, yeah, I knew. So what happened? Why didn't you ask, Sally? Oh, Andy, you don't understand. When I was hired 22 years ago, my job was to wait for that phone to ring. When the phone rang, I picked it up and, I found out what the customer's needs were. I went over, I worked with them, I got our plant involved. And then when we were satisfied and it was done and I completed, I go back to my desk and I wait for the phone to ring. That's my job. I said, I got it, Sally, but here's the problem. You're blocking the superhighway. You're the who calls on this company, and they have 10 divisions we're not selling. If you don't if you don't ask for introductions, nobody's going to ask for introductions, and that's not okay. So since you're a valued employee, we can move you into another position, but if you want to remain here at a higher paying job, you need to ask for warm introductions. Well, here's the good news. 2 weeks later, Sally had a warm introduction. So here's another major takeaway for you. Are you asking big fans for introductions in the magic moment of access? Because big fans are one of your strongest selling assets. Idea 5, better qualification with those people with whom you talk, using PIKs effectively. What's a PIK? It's a payment in kind. It's what the prospect does to show that he or she is serious. What are examples? Well, you could do another decision maker. For instance, the CEO in B2B sales. Invite us back for another meeting. You could visit our facility, fill out a credit application. All of these are, particular to individual businesses. You should be thoughtful about what are the PIKs in your business. The PIK decision rule is design your sales call, including the wisdom, to get the strongest PIK to which you've earned the right. Here are 2 thought questions. Do you qualify your pipeline with PIKs? In other words, if you think you have a good opportunity in the pipeline, what's the evidence? What has the prospect done to show they're committed to the process? And then again, how do we earn the right? How do we earn the right to the strongest possible PIK? Well, idea number 6 and the core of selling is how you earn the right. For us to succeed in selling and to have integrity, we need something like the 2-peak model. The prospect's on a false peak, on a false summit. They're looking down, and they're not noticing there's a higher peak of well-being nearby. We bring them to that, and that's the whole essence of selling. The prospect is looking down, and our job is to get them to look up and notice there's a higher peak of well-being. This is how we earn the right to access. And this gives us moral certainty to impel us forward. It's part of what impels us forward in the face of resistance. We also have to care about our prospects and that they're at this lower peak of well-being. Idea 7, better discovery. Now, there are 2 questions which I find are not always asked by salespeople to understand the opportunity. The why and why now question. The answer to why is the internal urgency. For instance, I'm thinking of changing vendors because the other guy or gal always ships late. That's the internal urgency. Now, the why now is the external urgency. It's the trigger event. So what's the trigger event? Well, let's take this case of late shipment. They've been telling us for 6 months they're thinking of changing because the other guy or gal is shipping late, but last week they decided to change. Why? Because the other guy or gal shipped late and they lost Walmart. That was the trigger event. That was the external urgency, but they never would have talked to us if there wasn't an internal urgency. It's important to get granular and to get into essential detail when you're doing the urgency. Let me give you some examples. And this is how you really can build breakthrough and build sales. I work with a billing and collecting company, and our true statement was our clients grow 20% faster than industry average. And this is one of the reasons why we're able to take the closing ratio from 20 to 40%. I had a client that sold advertising in physicians' journals. The urgency was 30% of our readers keep the magazine by the computer when they do online research. That was really the driver to a 55% increase in pages advertised within 1 year. And then finally, one of my clients made a gas analyzer machine that went into 24/7 production processes where the gas, the air needed to be sampled. And here the driver was 99.9% uptime. The buyers were saying, hey, Andy, you know, we love your product, but don't make me look stupid. Just cut your price in half and meet the competitive price. Yeah, but the other guy or gal wasn't giving you 99.9% uptime. Now, a strong method to move the process forward is confirmation. You start by asking the prospect, what were your takeaways at the end of the conversation? So when a prospect expresses interest in something like, you know, faster delivery, your follow-up question is this something you want to fast track or back burner? Ideally, you're hoping they're going to fast track, because if they tell you they want to fast track, that says, okay, if you want to fast track it, let's have a meeting next week, or let's meet with everybody on your team. So the sequence is, what are your takeaways? Is it fast track or back burner? And then you go for the PIK. Well, I think we just have enough time to go back to do or die at Bunty Candy. Just as a reminder, I was going bankrupt. I was losing money left and right. I went to Bunty. I was trying to sell those decorative tins. The buyers said we're good. And here I was able to use the crisis as a strategic resource to think out of the box. I asked myself this question, who's the real decision maker? I mean, they're buying $1 million worth of this product. They put the candy in it. They ship it out the door. They're not eating the stuff. It's going somewhere else. It's going to retailers. So I had a bold vision with these special artwork that I had access to. And I decided that the true decision maker was the retailer, like Kmart, Target, Sears. So with my last marketing money, I went to the food buyer. I went around to the next level. I went to the food buyer at 400 companies. And luckily, 1 out of the 400 was interested in my bold vision. Can you guess who it is? I bet you guess who it is. It was Walmart, and they wanted it now. It was urgent. So I changed the rules, and I had 10 times growth in the next 3 or 4 years. Bold vision, bold behavior. The bold vision was the art here that could be reproduced on the tins. And the bold behavior was changing the way people did business, going directly. A bonus idea, the 15-minute executive briefing. I just started doing this in the last month, and it is amazing. I've done 17 of these with top executives, owners, CEOs, presidents. It is transformational. If you're not doing a 15-minute executive briefing, I would definitely look into it. Well, we all know Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're almost at the end of today's webinar. Might want to think a little bit about some of the takeaways you might have gotten. Here's a recap of some of them. These are all things that pure selling can do. Bold vision, bold behavior. Level 5 leadership. Use the window and the mirror properly and take extreme ownership. Bring wisdom to every meeting or every outreach. Use the magic moment of access with your big fans to get introductions and to upsell. Whenever you have an interaction, qualify better with PIKs, payments in kind. Build urgency. Show the prospect they're on a false summit, that you could bring them to a higher summit of well-being. And when you're in a serious conversation, ask the why and why now questions, and then do the fast track to get to urgency. Now, if you want to know the 2 questions that I asked to close the sale, to become a sales trainer, send me an email and I'll respond to you. Before we get to questions, we have a couple of minutes here for questions. And if you have any, put them in the chat. Our next webinar in a month is 5 ways to defend your key accounts. So the focus here today was opening new accounts, new relationships. The one that's coming up in a month is how do you defend what you already have and prevent the competition from taking your customers away. Okay, so now we have time for some questions. You can put them in the chat. If you're interested, send me an email and I'll tell you about the 2 questions I asked to close the sale for the CPAs, which led them to hire me and get me into this business. If you're a top executive or you know one who might be interested, I do this 15-minute briefing. I'll show it to you. And if you want to participate in our selling survey, let me know. And here's my email address at the bottom of the screen. Let's turn now to questions coming in. First question here. You advocate bold behavior. Wouldn't this turn off some people and see us as too pushy? Yes, it might. Yes, it might. But my experience is you'll sell twice as much losing some of the people by being seen as too pushy because you're bringing the bold vision and you're bringing wisdom. Next, you talked about ownership, the window in the mirror. But isn't it true that some things are out of our control, like you can't sell the pricing or the credit policy? Or how about like a recession? Company's got nothing to do with it. There's a recession. How do I take ownership in a situation like that? My feeling is that if there's less business out there, we got to figure out a way to get a higher market share. That's our challenge. How do I discover wisdom? I'm relatively new. I don't know a lot about this industry. How do I discover wisdom? Well, what we like to do, and you might consider doing it in your firm, is get the whole team together and brainstorm wisdom. And the other thing you could do, which I have found to be very effective, is talk to some of your key customers and ask them what makes them very effective. It's typically wisdom. And if you talk to 10 customers like that, you'll have a whole portfolio of wisdom. PIKs, I don't like this idea of payment in kind. I do things for prospects. I don't ask them to do things for me. Hey, listen, if you're hitting your numbers, no problem. Some of the things that we're looking at today is to help you do even better than you're doing right now. But I will tell you that one of the reasons people avoid more assertive behavior is because of a failure to distinguish between social selling, be my friend, and business selling, let me earn the right to your profitable business. So we're not in a social context, we're in a business context, and this is totally okay behavior. Can you really form trusted advisor relationships before experience? I mean, the question here is, don't you need to be working with someone for a while? Well, I've been doing this thing for decades in so many different contexts. I'll share with you one from early on in my career. I was selling the packaging and I had a prospect who was buying from a competitor. I got with this prospect every month, giving them ideas as to how to build their business. And when the time came to place an order, they switched the business to me. And I happened to be in their office the day they got a call like this from my competitor. Hey, Tom, how you doing? It's time for your annual order. And Tom just, I heard our side of the conversation. He told me what happened, but Tom said, well, nothing today, And then he hung up the phone and he said to me, Andy, you've been helping me build my business for a year. Why would I give this guy any of my business? I'm giving it to you. Well, folks, I think that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And please join us in a month for our next webinar, How to Defend Your Customers from the Competition. Have a great month, everybody. Bye now.